Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss access and image manipulations. Where does this all originate from? Well, my original need was relating to webcam images. Sometimes they'd be a little off-center and things like that, and I was looking for a means to simply crop them. And that's where I came up with my original article here, where I created a very simple tool, and you can see here in the image, you load the big image here, it allows you to crop it, the result is here, and then you just press the save button and you get the resulting cropped image. That said, my needs then sort of grew a little bit beyond that. I started saying to myself, well, sometimes it's not just a crop. Sometimes we want to resize it or rotate it a bit. Sometimes we want to write an annotation on it. Just simple stuff. I don't need to get into all the advanced stuff that Photoshop and other applications permit. But I was looking for alternatives and to improve the performance and the features. And that's where I came out with the image editor, where I integrated a full-blown image editor into Access. And as you can see here, we got crop, flipping, resizing, rotating, drawing, text, etc., etc., etc. Now, why go into all of this using the web browser? Well, there are tools out there. There are alternatives out there that have existed a long time, because the old web browser wasn't capable of supporting what has been available on HTML for years, decades even. And so we had to turn to one of two options. Either you're looking at an ActiveX control, which you normally want to avoid. There's versioning issues, there's bitness, so you have to have the right one if you're on 32 and another one if you're on 64, and you have to register the components, and it's just a pain in the ass. Your other option is to get into really advanced API programming. You can do this type of stuff, a GDI Plus, and well, there are other libraries as well, but it's complex. Once again, you get into bitness because your APIs have to be coded to support 32 or 64 or both. And I was looking for the means to get away from all of those headaches. And that's where the web browser came in. In reality, this is a project that I developed several years ago. And I was doing house cleaning. I had no plans on doing this development or even this video in reality. And when I was doing some house cleaning, I came across something I had developed several years ago, but it didn't work. I hit a wall because of the web browser capabilities. Well, I said to myself, well, we got a new web browser, right? Let's see if it works now. And I got it operational. And that's where those articles originated from. Now, just to demonstrate, I'm not going to concentrate on the image cropping, but the principles are always the same. Why am I not going to concentrate on it? Because realistically, why wouldn't you implement a full image browser rather than just a cropping mechanism? You can do it, obviously, but to me, it just makes more sense. We're going to concentrate on the full-blown editor. But demo being a demo, let's just show just basic cropping. You pick any image you want. Doesn't make a difference. You can move, manipulate, resize the crop area to whatever you'd like. Oops, here, do this. So let's say that's what we want. That's what we want. So here on the left side is the original image. On the right side, what's being displayed is going to be the output, the final cropped image. And when we're happy, we just press Save Cropped Image. And now on our desktop appears our cropped image. So that works beautifully, but like I said, I wanted a full-blown editor. So I tried different things. Some of the programs I found out there, some of the HTML, although it worked beautifully in HTML, when I tried to port it locally, wouldn't work. There is security restrictions in place. Anyway, long story short, I managed finally to get one to function properly, and it was this guy here. And it's the same basic idea. So I'm going to open an image. It's going to load it. And now, as you can see here, we've got a full-blown editor. And this is the Toast UI image editor. This is what I implemented. I take no credit for it. What I take credit for is I've managed to now port it into Access. So now we can benefit from it and have a full-blown independent editor in Access that requires no APIs. We don't have to consider and worry about bitness, none of that stuff. And then you can come in here and you can crop to your heart's content and go and get the image that you want. You say apply, and then let's say we want to rotate it. So we can come around and flip it, let's say. And when we're happy, I don't know, you could add text if you want. You can draw, like you have the options. You could say, I want to make this into a grayscale image. And then when you're happy with everything, you press Save Image. And you're going to have the output image. Okay? So it works beautifully. You've got lots of capabilities. Just to demonstrate, I found a second library that I could implement. And it's going to be the exact same general idea. We're going to go select an image. It will load in the browser control for us to work with. And once it's finally there, you can pick, crop, rotate, flip, whatever you're wanting to do. And flip it. You can add fine-tune, brightness, it's always the same thing. You have the different options. You can change it to black and white. You can invert it to blue, whatever you want. And when you're happy playing around with it, you press Save the edited image once again, and there it is for you to enjoy. Now, right now I'm saving all of this on my desktop. It's hard-coded, but just to say, all of this is stuff that you can control in VBA. So if you wanted to automate this to save it to a specific location, to give it a particular name, you have that capability, okay? How does this all work? It isn't very complicated in reality. And all of these web browser bits, whether it be the cropping, the image editor, they always work on the same principle. I read a template HTML file. It's just there. It gives me the framework of the HTML I need. Then we use VBA to replace whatever needs to be replaced, and we render it in the web browser. So let's take a look briefly. Like I say, I have a template HTML file, okay? If we look at the standard file for 2 seconds, you're going to see that normally here we have a path to the image that gets loaded and all of the information for that image. However, in our template image, instead, I put a path here with a variable, and it's a unique variable that there'll never be another instance of this anywhere. I make it unique in this way so then I can use in VBA the replace command. But basically, if we just look at it very quickly, I load CSS libraries here, style sheets, so that controls the look and feel, so colors and sizes of fonts and things like that. Down here, I load a series of JavaScript libraries, so this is actually the image editor itself. And then the very last thing I do is I'm running some JavaScript, which does exactly that. It's a new image editor instance, and it does what it needs to do on the HTML size. And then here I have settings. So I have the load image setting. Like I say, we're going to load the image that we select in Access. That's why I need to be able to replace it. Here I'm controlling what menus are visible to the user, accessible to the user. I specify where the menu appears, top, bottom, etc. So as you can see, you can configure things and say, oh no, I don't want my user to have mask, or I don't want them to have access to drawing, or whatever. You can go and you can restrict it and say, I just want crop and text, and that's all they're going to have. So it's highly customizable, this one, at least this image editor. And a few other configurations, changing sizes, fonts, colors, things like that to make it the way I want it. But these are not necessarily mandatory. But as you can see, you can configure things. But this is a template. The image is not specified here. I have a variable. And when we're in our database, if we open it up, you'll see now, we open the form. Here I let the user select the file, and here's a web browser. So let's look at the image selection process. I'm using the file dialog function that's on my website already. It has everything you need. So it's late binding, so you don't need any reference libraries or any of that. And I just define a series of filters here. So I want to only allow the user to select images because we're not working with other files. So BMP, GIFs, JPEGs, PNG, WebP, etc., etc. And so they make their selection. And if they make a count, so they've made a selection, there's actually a record that, or it's a file, an image file selected. Then it's going to call this function. And this function is where everything happens. This is the guy. It goes and finds that index dynamic HTML, the file here, our template file, and it's going to read it to a variable. And because it's a static variable, it only will do it once, and it will keep it in memory for the session. So we don't have to do useless I/O operations of continuously hitting a file and reading, hitting a file and reading. We just do the operation once. Then, to make all these different files that I'm loading, the CSS files, the JS files, to make those happy in the new Edge browser, so we have to massage them. Right here, I have what's called relative paths. It's relative to the index file. So where's this? Okay, I got to go in the JS folder to locate this file. I got to go in the CSS file to locate this file. Well, the Edge browser, if you do it dynamically, has no relative path. It doesn't have a file from which it's starting. So we have to turn the relative paths into absolute paths, and we do that by hard coding the current path of the database plus whatever subfolder it's in. This part may change depending on how you've set up your file, but in my case, that's how it works. Secondly, not only do we have to turn into an absolute file, we also have to prefix the string with our famous HTTPS MS access. Otherwise, it will not work. Okay, this is a new security requirement to use the web browser control. You have to do this as well. The next thing, we need to then escape. It's called escaping any single quotes that may be in that HTML. Why? Because down here in our document write process, we use the single quotes as delimiters. So if there are single quotes present in this, it will basically break this write command and you won't get the output you're expecting. It just won't work. So to make this all work, once again, we have to massage things and we have to escape. And to escape them, we're going to use the slash. Okay, so we've adjusted any of the files that we're calling properly. We've adjusted if there happen to be any single quotes. See, there are single quotes in my string right here. Next, we've got that all set up. We have to deal with the image. The whole point here is to work with an image. So what I'm doing is I'm going and looking on the form. What was the file that was selected by the user? Once we get that in memory, I read it as a binary, and then I encode it in base 64, because in the HTML, it's expecting base 64's image, so it can work with. And then I get the MIME type, so JPEG, PNG, etc., etc. And then I go in there and I replace, remember that famous string, I replace the famous string that's here with that new encoded red binary with prepending it with the data, the MIME type base 64, because you always have to prepend it with that first. So I replace that variable with this, and I push it out to the web browser here, and now we have a fully rendered image editor, fully functional. I know some of this may seem a little strange, but it really isn't. It's very simple. We read the file. We have to convert relative paths to absolute. We have to escape single quotes because of this fact here. We import the image properly, and we render it in our browser. Now, what about saving? Saving the image once we've edited it really isn't rocket science either. First of all, that is no longer needed. I've changed the way it works. But basically, how does it work? Well, I build this command where it goes, and I'm going to get elements by tag name, and it's going to go find me all the canvases on that HTML page, so in the browser. And I'm telling it, go get me the first canvas. You could have pages that have multiple canvases. That's why you have to identify which one. In my case here, there's only the one, but I still have to indicate that. And then I'm using this command to data URL. Now this is built into JavaScript. This isn't something I've invented. This is just the way to go onto the canvas and retrieve what is currently there. And then I run that command and it returns back a base64 encoded image that's been modified based on whatever the user chose to do. Then we come through here and we're going to take that base64 string that we've identified. We remove that initial data image PNG base64 because that you don't need in an output image. It's just there for the HTML, for the browser, but it shouldn't be in the actual file itself. So we're going to strip it out and just replace it with nothing. And then we're going to write the decoded base64 image to a file of your choosing. So like I say here I'm saying put it on my desktop, but this is something that you can entirely configure. Same thing. Here I have this little bit of code to go generate a file name. This you can hard code. You could put a text box for the user to specify the output file name. You have lots of flexibility here. But for this example, I build a file name here and I'm outputting it to the desktop. And that's it. So here we retrieve the image from the canvas. Here we just strip out that section from that string because we don't want it. And then we write the decoded base64 image to file. And that's it. So this really isn't very complicated. I know some of this code is a little strange, unfamiliar, especially knowing that you need to do this. But whenever you work in HTML canvases, this is the magic right here. And I didn't have to invent it. I just needed to be aware of it to use it. But this is what allows us to do so much with the web browser control. And that's how we end up with these fully functional image editors where we can come and say do something, let's say like that, apply, save, and well, we'll get out of the access for a second. We can close down this guy too, and we can now output cropped images, add text, arrows, whatever you'd like, very easily. And it's the same principle, whether it's this browser, this image editor, or this image editor, it's always the same principle. Which brings me to my next article. I'm giving a little bit of a sneak peek here of what's going to be coming out. With this in mind, what I've done here in my demos, I've always just outputted as a PNG. And I was thinking to myself, well, what about other formats? Well, that is the beauty here. We have even more flexibility with the web browser control in JavaScript. And this is where I started developing this guy here, an image format converter. Let's just look at it quickly and I'll just show you, because you can apply this even inside the other demos that I did today. But just to illustrate, once again, we can go grab a picture. It doesn't make a difference which one. Now, in this case, it's just a converter, so I don't have an image editor here. This could all be integrated into one. But just to demonstrate, I've opened a JPEG. And now let's say we convert it to a PNG. So I'm going to press convert. And if we go to the desktop for a second, you'll see the image shows up here, and we now have a PNG, fully functional PNG of that exact image. Okay. If we want, we could then say, I want to go get a WebP. Now here, if you notice, the output quality, if applicable, it applies to JPEGs in WebP. So we could come here and we could say, okay, convert it at a quality of 1, which is 100%. So we'll do that just to show you. And if we minimize this guy again and come here, we now have the WebP. And just to demonstrate it does work, there's no issue there. And if we come back here, we're just going to hover over it for a second, you'll see a 1.46 megabyte in size. Let's come back here and let's change this to 0.3% output quality. It's nothing else changed. We're still doing the WebP. And we minimize it. We get the image. Once again, it's fully functional. There's no issue. And now you have to decide if the degradation in quality affects the quality of the image overall. But the file size has now reduced to 35 kilobytes. And that's where that quality factor comes in. It allows you not only to output it in a different format, but you can also impact the compression. So obviously, the more you compress it, you lose quality of pixelation and things like that. But just showing you the amount of flexibility you can have by simply using a web browser to convert an image. So now we don't need to use external libraries and things like that. We can do it all with the web browser control if we want. How is it done? This one's actually even simpler because in reality, what do we have? Well, if we come into the HTML, you'll first of all notice here, the simplified, I believe, is the right one. As you can see, I don't just manage on the first try to do things. Sometimes it takes me multiple iterations to get where I need to be for these demos. But as you can see here, it's a basic HTML. I create a canvas. Here I have the initialization of the canvas. And once again, here's that famous string that I'm going to convert. I'm going to replace it out with my base 64 representation of image selected by the user. It's always the same principle. So we come here, once again, like I say, if we just quickly look, it's the exact same thing. And I do a regen page again. We come here, what does it do? It reads, we don't need this one anymore. It reads that simplified HTML. It converts things over to absolute. It escapes the single quote. It takes the selected image, encodes it, replaces it in my HTML string, and outputs it to our browser. It's the exact same process. Then when that's done, the user here makes a couple selections, and then we select convert image. Well, how do we convert image? You're going to notice here, this code is almost identical verbatim to what we saw in the image editor. It would be almost the exact same thing you'd see inside the cropping mechanism as well. But remember that to data URL? Notice this time, however, this. I am now using arguments in it, which I didn't do previously, but you could. So in the image editor, in the cropping, we could add the same functionality of not only allow me to edit and crop, but even convert image formats. We could all do it in one shot because all you need to do is include here 1 or 2 output arguments. The first one being here, the MIME type of the output you want. So an image JPEG, an image TIFF, an image whatever you want. And the second one is the quality. Now you can specify the quality on any of the file image MIME types, but it doesn't mean it's going to take effect because to my knowledge only JPEG and WebP files will actually use it. But if it's there, it doesn't hurt if you use it on other formats. That's why I didn't make an if statement here. It just won't be used. But basically that's the trick here is I take the format, right, from the combo box selection from the user, and then I'm going to use that to build the file name because whatever format they pick, if they pick a PNG, I want the PNG output, but I also want my file name now to be a PNG. And if they pick a WebP, well, then I want the output to be a WebP, and I want my file name to be a WebP. That way it's recognized properly. But beyond that, it's the exact same thing. We do the data URL, get that string. We go into that string and take out the first part of it, the data image, and then we write it to an array, to a file. And there you got the output of any image you want converted into the format you want. So that is the beauty now of a very simple process where we're using a hidden web browser control because you don't actually see it. Okay, if we open it up, but it is there. There is a web browser control. but I'm not displaying it to the user. It has no value. And now we can convert any image we want to different formats. And if we minimize this guy, he'll show up here. Here you go. And we now have a PNG. The original file was a GIF. And like I say, we could easily, and I plan on improving the other two demos, both cropping and the image editor eventually, with this functionality of not only being able to crop and edit, but also being able to select different output formats. So I just wanted to demonstrate this will be coming out in a future article, or maybe even a video, although I pretty much covered it here today, haven't I? But I just wanted to illustrate a little bit about what we can do, some of what we can do with the web browser control. It does open doors. It's not always straightforward. The web browser control, especially for doing this type of advanced stuff, integrating libraries and that, can be a real pain in the butt. There are other libraries I had come across, and when I tried to implement them, I got all sorts of CORS errors. Okay, this is cross-origin resource errors from HTML. Basically, when you make a request, all the requests have to come from the same place. Otherwise, the browser will block it for safety reasons. And originally, that was even happening in these libraries because I was trying to specify the path to the image files. So C 2 points, users. It wouldn't take that. It wasn't happy. So the way I went about it, and this is why all of this now works today, is because I instead use VBA to convert it to a base 64 image. So therefore, there is no local file resource being accessed by HTML. I'm accessing it via VBA, where we have full permissions to do that. And I'm just passing a string representation of the image to the HTML. And that is enough to bypass CORS. So these are the little things. It takes time, experience, smacking your head against the computer. But persistence eventually pays off. And you're able to achieve things like this. So I hope this can be of use to some of you. I've never seen anyone else do anything even remotely like this. And right now, this is thanks to the new web browser control. For all of its shortcomings, and there are many, it still is something that enables us to do some pretty nifty things. For me, I would take this over ActiveX or really complex APIs for image editing any day of the week. And the functionality is just astounding with these two libraries that I have here. Now, I have this one on my website as a demo. I'll have to see. I'll probably be uploading this one as well, just to give people different ideas and different options for what they use. But just remember, all of this is HTML, so you can control look, feel. It's all there for you to customize. It's just a question of editing some HTML or some CSS or adding JS to do whatever you want. But it is really pretty straightforward, because you look at some of the pages here, there isn't a lot of HTML here. And yet with this, I'm able to convert images back and forth very simply. We'll leave it there. I do hope this helps, is informative. I hope some of you actually find it useful and are able to put it into practice. Do let me know if ever this is of use. I mentioned in my article, if ever you have ideas for other things that could be cool with the web browser control, even if you haven't managed to do it yourself, sort of pointing me in a direction of it would be cool if you could, maybe I'll be able to look into some of those other projects. Right now, I'll be moving on to some other videos that are going to be outside of the sphere of access. So we'll leave it there. Thank you, as always, for spending, a half hour of your time with me today. Greatly appreciated. And if you don't mind, like, share, subscribe, leave me comments. Until I manage to get enough critical mass, I don't know if I'll be continuing to do many more of these videos. But for the time being, for those of you that are here to see, I do hope this has been informative. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and we will see you in future videos.